All right, so today I want to talk about this story out of the Voice of Europe. Now, again, this isn't Canadian, but very relevant to a lot of the stuff that's going on in Canada, and it's one of the biggest issues out there right now. So I wanted to make a video about it. But anyway, so right now going on in Europe, there's a lot of tensions. I mean, not that there wasn't before, but Erdogan, the leader of Turkey, basically to get to Europe from the Middle East, you can go through Turkey. It's probably the fastest way. I'm not a geography expert, but I believe it'd be the fastest way to get from like Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, all those areas, and to get to Europe. And Turkey is right along the border with Syria, I believe. Um, so if you're a migrant coming from the Middle East, well, you can just go right on through Turkey and then up to Europe. Um, but normally, Europe and Turkey have those borders closed. But now, because Turkey's mad at the rest of Europe, they're threatening to, and more than likely going to let all these migrants through on their way up into Europe. And not that Europe isn't already finished. Personally, I believe that the UK's, the Germany's, the Sweden's, those countries are countries that are going to be in for a world of hurt going forward because they've let in way too many migrants. And I mean, the overwhelming majority of them shouldn't have been let in the first place. I mean, I think it's a legitimate argument. You could say none of them should have been let in the first place. And you look at the countries that didn't let any in, or the ones that were very selective, namely the Polands and the Hungaries of the world. They're not having any issues. But in Sweden, cars are getting burned every night. There's bombs going off. There's people have grenades and they're throwing them at each other. Like Sweden, I mean, the amount of sexual assaults there is through the roof, as well as in Germany and the UK. I mean, one of the biggest sexual assault scandals I think ever. The all the Muslims that were raping British girls. That was all covered up. There's estimates that say there's into the hundreds of thousands of girls that have been groomed by them, but yet no one seems to care. And that's kind of the whole point of one of the big points I wanted to drill home is here is that as a society, are we really that afraid of being called racist that we're willing to let hundreds of thousands of girls get raped because we're afraid to be called racist? Like it, and I think that is true. As a whole, we are. I mean, personally, I couldn't care less. Um, it's not racist to point out facts, right? Like it makes no sense. But that's where we're at in the West, that we're so dumbed down and so brainwashed that we're willing to let hundreds of thousands of girls get raped just because we're afraid to be called racist. Like look in Sweden, UK, Germany, all these countries that look at Italy. They're one of the countries that was big on open borders recently, and look at what they have with the coronavirus right now. It's terrible there. Um, they're having tons of issues. They're having if it gets any worse, I've heard reports that say they're going to run out of hospital beds. Like, what are they going to do? But anyway, like that's what I wanted to point out, in that we need to take this as I mean, not that it's going to ring home to enough people for it to matter, but I at least wanted to give it a shot. We need to take this as a lesson in Canada and in the States, that we can't do this. I mean, Canada, we've already gone too far, I believe, but at the very least, when it does blow up, you'll be like, hey, do you remember that guy I was watching on YouTube that was warning me about this kind of stuff? Yeah, yeah, do you remember him? At the very least, that's what I would want this to be. But things are going to get worse before they get better, and it's going to take a while. And I think that the minute that we get majority, I don't, for lack of a better way of putting it, non-white or I guess, people that have been in Canada for a while, that's when things are really going to start to go downhill. Because, you know, not that, like I always want to throw the caveat out there. People make it come across as a zero immigration thing. I know there's a lot of people that believe that, and not that I don't see where they're coming from, and not that I wouldn't advocate for that, at least in the short term. but we don't need to do zero immigration. The reason why I throw that out there is that in these countries there is right-leaning people, and it'd be nice to have those kind of people. But the only way to do that, and what I would just in a nutshell, what I would propose, at least looking back on it, what we should have did with immigration, what I believe we should do with immigration, is that number one, we have to be selective with who we bring in. Number two, they have to be working, no free riders. Number three, we get rid of welfare, um, taxpayer funded healthcare. I mean, altogether, or at the very least, um, until you've been working and paying into the system for X amount of time, whether that's 10 years, 20 years, whatever. But the fact that people can come into Canada and get free housing, free healthcare, I mean, even free dental, which citizens don't even get it unless you get it through your work. Um, is absolutely insane. And how that's in any way controversial just goes to show just how crazy things are out there right now. Like, how is that controversial? And like I always point out too, is that I would like to give away free healthcare and free welfare to everybody, but we don't have the money. The only way you can justify that position is if resources, i.e., money, housing, all that kind of stuff is infinite. That we can just, oh, we don't have enough money to pay for this family to come in. We can just print, 10, 100 grand, whatever it's going to cost. But you can't keep doing that forever. The reason why the left believes that is because they're only singly short term, will to power, me, give me focus. That's all they care about. The long run could not matter less to them, which is why I always scoff when they claim to care so much about climate change, because that is the one issue out of hundreds of issues that you could care about, to where in the long run, oh, if we don't address climate change and down the road we're gonna have issues. Well, I literally would bet you every dollar I have that if we keep spending at the rate we're currently spending, and keep letting in migrants at the rate, especially in Europe, at they're currently letting in, you're going to have a lot more problems from that than you are from, a minuscule amount of temperature change that you haven't even proven is caused by humans, or at the very least significantly caused by humans. Um, but anyway, I just wanted to kind of rant about this kind of stuff because it really bothers me, and this is the one of the big reasons why Canada and the Europe and all these kind of countries are not progressing at all anymore. And it's simply because we're so weighed down that we don't have much of a free market, especially in Canada. The migrants that come in, if they are working, which the majority of them aren't, they're working low wage jobs, which is keeping wages down. That's the other thing to point out too, is that you'll make that point, and the left will argue with that, but Bernie Sanders in 2016 was making that point. Like I always point out in the whole political divide nowadays, Bernie Sanders 2016 is too far out there when it nowadays for the left. Like wrap your head around that. Bernie Sanders 2016 did not want open borders. He said that open borders, it leads to a lot of people coming in working low wage jobs, thus driving down the wages. And he doesn't believe that anymore because the majority of the left has gone off the deep end, and he has to go along with that. But that's where we're at. That the socialist guy from 4 years ago is too crazy for the modern left. And yet people still have the gall to say, "Oh, the right is just as responsible as for the problems out there as the left." Like, are you joking? Like it I'd have to, like, the amount of hyperbole I'd have to come up with for a comparison of what the right is, like, insane. But and again, I'm not even a strong conservative supporter, but I at least call it like it is, and that's something that's really lacking um, out there nowadays. But anyway, like I said, I just wanted to rant about this because people seem to be so clueless when it comes to these topics. It's not even funny. And I mean, people nowadays are largely emotions based, so that's kind of part of the reason. But like I say, I've talked enough for this. I could talk forever, but I'm going to leave it there. If you like the video, make sure to hit that like and subscribe. I do have my PayPal linked in the description. I do have email for e-transfer. I'd appreciate any donations, regardless of how big it is. But at the very least, hit that subscribe if you haven't already, and stay tuned for more videos.